Welcome to Animal Chat Time. I'm so glad you're here. We are going to be learning about salmon today. I am Nora. This is Dana. We are not fish, but we're going to show you how to dance like one. So let's get into it. It is an amazing day because salmon are, as I always say, weird, but also obviously wonderful. So salmon is actually the common name for several species of ray-finned fish. So basically, it's a fish. They have a very specific type of fins, ray fins, and they're in this kind of big family. So not everything that is in the salmon family we call a salmon, but everything we call a salmon is in the family. It's fine. It's not confusing at all. It's totally okay. Some other fish in this family are trout. They're actually considered, one second, Betty, hey, hey, could you be cool? Thank you. So other fish in the salmon family that are technically of the salmon family are trout, char, grayling, and whitefish. So they don't look like the salmon we have in our head, but they're like, oh, like cousins and things like that. Salmon are native to tributaries. So those are rivers and rivers of rivers in the North Atlantic and Pacific. Of North America. So we see them in the oceans, Atlantic and Pacific Ocean, and we see them in the rivers around those areas. So how many species of salmon are there? It's quite a few. But the ones that we're going to sort of talk about today is the 8 species of Pacific salmon, because I am in the Pacific Northwest, if you are looking at America and Canada, but it would be the Pacific Southwest if you're looking at just Canada, because I'm on Vancouver Island and the rest of Canada is kind of more north than me. So let's talk about Pacific salmon. We have Chinook, coho, chum, sockeye salmon, pink salmon, steelhead trout, and Masu and Imago salmon, which are 2 Asian species. So they are in the Pacific Ocean. They don't just come to North America or Turtle Island. They also go to Japan and that side of the Pacific. So one of the things that I think makes salmon so amazing is they are this really big word that I do not know how to pronounce. So I had to look it up and I'm going to try. So they are anadromous. 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 They're anadromous. I'm not saying it 100% correct, but we all get there. Now, what does that mean? What is this word that I'm trying to say? How is that so interesting? Well, they hatch in freshwater, they migrate to the ocean, and then they come back to freshwater to reproduce. So why is that so interesting? I'll tell you in a second. That's so interesting because when we think about fish, we think there's saltwater fish and there's freshwater fish, and they do not combine. And most of the time they don't combine, but salmon do because the very specific, very interesting way that they reproduce. And so they have to have all these things on their body that let them go from fresh to salt to freshwater again. So they're not making one change and just like figuring it out on the go. All of the salmon populations, all of the individual fish in those species are doing this through time. All of them have done it. So folklore, Taylor's version, folklore would say that fish return to the exact same spot that they hatched. Actually not true. They go to the same rivers and the same streams that they hatch, but it's not like the exact place. We used to think the same thing about sea turtles, that they go back to the exact point on the beach that they were born. And it's really more like the exact 25 to 50 kilometer stretch of beach. A lot of people wanted to know how they do this and why they do this. And we can't ask salmon. We don't speak salmon just yet. We're working on it. But one of the thoughts is if a salmon is born in that area, it must be a really good environment for the salmon to be born. So why not replicate that birth over and over again. If the salmon eggs are washed away, or if the salmon is eaten before they can lay their eggs, or things like that, it's not a good spot for salmon anymore. And so if they're not born there, it means it's not good. So if a salmon is born and can make it back, it must still be a really good river place for them to live. So that's maybe the reason why they go back to the same spot. Maybe when we ask the salmon, they'll be like, oh, no, I just really like home. Who doesn't like going back home? Fair enough. So we've also been studying how they get back home. And that is also super interesting because, again, we have no idea. And I love science because we have no idea about things and we can be curious. We can ask lots of questions. We can have a lot of hypotheses about this. And then we can say, oh, it is this, or it's this other really kooky thing that's happening. So homing behavior has been shown to depend on a couple different things. One of them is a celestial understanding of the world. So salmon, celestial, the stars, are able to see stars from water and go like, this is how I get back home. This is what the stars look like when I was leaving the tributary to go to the ocean, leaving the estuary to go to the ocean. And when they're swimming around the Pacific Ocean or the Atlantic, they're looking around and going like, oh, actually the Big Dippers will still look this way, so I need to go this way. They also have an understanding of magnetic sensory. So in all of our bodies, we have red blood cells, and there's some iron in that, but they have a really special relationship with the iron in their bodies, and they have sort of like a magnet sensor in their nose. The same way that we see sharks have sensors in their noses that they're able to detect electro wavelengths. They can hunt that way. Salmon can also hunt that way, but also this is how they can navigate. So they're able to feel the magnetic the magnetic poles around the world, and they're able to say, oh, this feels like home. So they're literally using magnets to like pull themselves home. But then also, because their noses are not amazing enough, they also have very, very good sniffers. And so they're able to smell home. One of the things that we see salmon do is when the salmons, when they come back to lay their eggs, when they spawn, some people think what happens is they're swimming around the ocean and then they start to smell more fresh water. It's the rainy season. It is beginning to be winter time. It is going through fall. There's more water, and all that water is pushed from their home and it goes out to the ocean. So they literally smell their home and they're like, I should go to there. So that is amazing. And it just shows you like how cool this little, sometimes very big, but this little fish is understanding the magnets around the world. They're understanding the stars. They're understanding smells. Very, very, very cool. So let's talk about the life cycle of a salmon because wowzers. So the life cycle of a BC salmon, a British Columbian salmon that I'm going to talk about, starts when a mature salmon female scoops out a hollow hole in the gravel in a river and deposit between 2,500 and 3,000 eggs. So she makes this this little gravel trench. She puts a bunch of eggs in it. The eggs are immediately fertilized by a male that is hanging out, and then both of them cover up the gravel. So these eggs go into the gravel and they get incubated in the gravel over winter. So that's why the gravel is really, really important, because this is going to keep them nice and safe and warm, away from things that want to eat them, away from cold, away from maybe warm. Just is like a very excellent place for them to hang out. So the parents don't have to hang out with the eggs, like, you know, maybe a chicken or another bird, lay their eggs and they get out of here. Now, when the salmon hatch, they hatch under the gravel where they're going to be very, very safe from everything. And at that point, they're called elvins. So they're little elves. And so this is over winter. They have they've in their eggs, they've incubated, and the start of the spring, they become alevins and they're eating little algae and things like that in the gravel. And then springtime happens and they grow into fry. And when they're fry, they actually look like salmon. They look like small little fish. They're not an elvin that looks like an elf. The fry develop into smolts, and then the smolt is when, at that stage of their life, they go to the ocean. So fries are still a little too small to go to the ocean. They hang out in the freshwater river, and when they become a smolt, they're like, something in my brain is telling me I have to go to the ocean. Peace out. I will see you later. So they do what is called a sea run, which it should be a sea swim, but that's fine. So each of the 5 different species of salmon here have a different life cycle. And sometimes it's 2 years, sometimes it's 6 or 7 years. The cycle itself looks the same, but sometimes it can take a lot longer. So the smolts migrate downriver. They go to like cold water. Salmon love cold water. This is something that when we talk about global warming, we talk about heat domes, other things that are happening. It's really bad for salmon because they like it nice and cold. So we want to keep global temperatures normal so the salmon are happy, and all the other animals. So the smolts migrate down the river to the cold water. They go to the Pacific Ocean and they grow and mature. They live their life and they travel. They swim thousands of kilometers because they're always swimming. But they swim all around the Pacific Ocean and they eat all kinds of different things. They eat seafood, obviously. Plankton, crab, shrimp, smaller fish, like herring and things like that. And the different species actually determine the different colors of the fish. And so if a fish is eating like a lot of shrimp and crab, they will be like a little bit more red than one that's just eating a bunch of plankton that would be a little more green, which I think is pretty cool. So the salmon, when they're ready to spawn, they like realize, oh, it's spawning season. I have to go lay my eggs or fertilize eggs. I have to make babies. They start to smell the fresh water and they're like, I'm going to go here. When they start spawning, which is just that means they go back to their home rivers. When they start spawning, they don't actually eat at all. The only thing they want to do is they want to get back home and they want to lay those eggs or fertilize them, which I think is super interesting because sometimes this can be thousands of kilometers without eating a thing, which I don't know. I go about 20 minutes and I'm like, I could use a snack. So I will probably not be a salmon in the next life. So they don't eat anything. They just live off of the stored fat inside of them. Their bodies change color. They change shape because they want to show off to their boyfriends and girlfriends. Hey, you should make eggs with me. You should come over here. Look how great this is. This is awesome. They put on like their best outfits. They lay their eggs. They fertilize their eggs. And then they die. They go to fish heaven, which I think is also so interesting. They spend their whole lives just hanging out, being fish. They get this call to make the next generation of fish babies, and then they die and they become nutrients in the whole ecosystem. Something that I think is so interesting is we scientists that are not me have been able to track fish nutrients all through the ecosystems all through Canada. And so in the riparian area zones, that is just the forests and trees and plants that are around rivers. Scientists have been able to see the very, very tops of trees and like take leaves from it and do core samples in the tree, and they find salmon nutrients in there. So when the salmon die, they don't just die. They are part of the fertilizer that makes these huge trees in British Columbia grow. They've also been able to find salmon cells in things like wolves that don't actually eat salmon because they ate something that ate salmon. And that thing grew big and strong and was able to then help these wolves. So it's I just think so cool that like everything is just perfectly in this circle of life. So let's talk a little bit how they can go from freshwater to saltwater and then back again. So very few fish can do this. First of all, this is very amazing. This is very cool. They're like little fish scientists when they figured all this out. Why can't they do it? Basically, if saltwater fish are exposed to fresh water, it can cause their cells to get really, really, really big and they can burst. And then if a freshwater fish is exposed to salt water, it can cause the cells to shrivel. And you need your cells to be plump, not too plump. You don't want little cells that look like raisins. And this is just because salt, right? If you eat like a lot of pretzels, a lot of popcorn, you get really thirsty because your body, your cells are going like, oh God, there's too much salt in here. But if you have too much water, you're like, I could really use a salty snack because your cells are going, I could use a little bit more. And so you are constantly going through something called osmoregulation, and these fish are as well. It's a delicate balance. We have to have like a perfect ecosystem in our bodies. So salmon don't have this problem because they evolved in this really amazing way that they both behaviorally and physiologically will not have little raisin cells or exploding grape cells, to have that analogy go too far. So to offset the dehydration effects of salt water, when salmon first get from freshwater to saltwater, they start drinking water. And I know that sounds super weird because like, wouldn't fish just drink water all the time? But they normally don't. They live in water, so they don't really have to drink water. When fish are eating, they take in water that way because that is how they swallow. There's water around them all the time. But salmon will open up their mouths and drink tons and tons and tons of water. It consumes so much of it because it is trying to get rid of all the salt that they're getting. And so they're drinking this water to flush their kidneys, flush everything out. Now, they want their kidneys to make a very like dilute urine, essentially. So it's not just very salty pee. No one wants that. You're welcome, parents. So they are drinking tons of it. But then it's really interesting because they have a special enzyme in the epithelial cells in their gills. What am I talking about? Epithelial cells are just skin cells. So they have a special enzyme on top of their gills that uses a whole bunch of different mechanisms that pumps the salt out of the water before it even gets into their blood system, which is super neat. So they're drinking water and their kidneys are like flushing out all this salt, but then the water that's coming through their gills is already being filtered and the salt is already out of there. And so it's pumping the salt out. So when they are converting back and forth, they're able to their kidneys don't have to work so hard. Before the salt water even gets into the salmon's blood, it goes through the gills and it's able to just be like regular while they're figuring all of this out. Now, this is happening at not a slow rate, but it doesn't happen overnight. The behavioral part of all of this that's so interesting is the fish go from freshwater, they go through an estuary, which is where saltwater and freshwater mix up, and they hang out in the estuary, and they hang out there for, it depends on the salmon, sometimes a couple weeks, sometimes a couple days, but this is when their body they're taking on tons and tons of salt water, they're flushing their system, and when they're taking on all that salt water, their body's changing so they can deal with the salt water essentially, and their body's going, yes, this is something I need to do. The cells get ready to be a saltwater fish. It can't happen overnight. It can't happen overnight because there's so much to do, and the fish just know to just chill out in the estuary while their body figures it out. which is pretty neat that they just don't like swim through and go like, oh, it's fine. I'm just gonna, oh no, it's too much. It's too salty. I don't like it. And they're in an estuary as well. And so there's lots of fresh water that's going through. It's not as salty as it's going to be in the ocean or in the sea. And so they're able to process it in a slower time if you just like picked up the fish and threw it in salt water. And so the same things happen when they come back. These changes don't happen immediately. They have to swim around, they have to hang out for a while. When the salmon come back, they have to hang out at the mouth of the home stream, in the estuary, and they hang out again for several days, sometimes several weeks, and they move towards less salty acclimation. So the kidneys change again. So they used to like pump tons because we want to get like all that salt out. Their kidneys get to slow down, and the salt pumps literally don't have to move all that salt around, and they start to go, oh yeah, this is fresh water. We don't have to pump and get all that salt out. So when they get back to the home stream and the water is brackish, which is less concentrated salt water, they do the whole thing. Like I said, the whole thing in reverse. And so they hang out and they go, okay, there's more fresh water. My body doesn't have to work so hard. It is, and in fact, if it pumped too much, I wouldn't get enough salt. So I get to slow down, figure all that out. And I think that is really super neat because most fish don't need to do this. Most fish are either born in the salt water, so they're good to go, or they're born in fresh water and they're good to go. Their bodies just know how to handle a lot of salt or not too much salt. And so they have to change twice, which is pretty cool. So we talked about their super good noses. Atlantic salmon can smell one drop of scent. Sometimes it's blood, sometimes it's algae, sometimes it's delicious minerals from their home stream. One drop of scent in the equivalent of 10 Olympic-sized swimming pools. So you have 10 Olympic swimming pools, you put one drop of blood, and they're like, oh, what was that from? Is that something to eat? Was that from a shark and I should go away? Or is that home? Which I think is pretty neat. Salmon can like kind of be three different colors through their whole life. Juvenile sockeye salmon, not stockeye, are born light colored because they don't want to get eaten. So they look kind of like rocks and the water around them. When they go to the ocean, they're silvery blue, again, because they don't want to be eaten. And when they're in the ocean, silvery blue is their camouflage. Things can't see them from above or below because they just look like a wave. And when it's time to spawn, their bodies turn a brilliant red and their heads turn green. And when I show you the PowerPoint slides in a second, you'll see sockeye and you'll be like, what on earth is that ridiculous, amazing fish? That is a fish that wants to lay eggs. Like I said, they are keystone species. And so if they were to disappear, then the ecosystems that they live in would dramatically change. They're very, very, very important. The rotting salmon carcasses, like I said, do transfer the nutrients. And these nutrients that are found deep in the ocean go all the way up these rivers, all the way inland through these tributaries, and these nutrients wouldn't exist. There's no way that deep water nutrients could get inland unless it's for salmon. And so, yeah, we found these nutrients in mosses, herbs, the tops of trees, shrubs, songbirds, wolves, bears. They're very, very cool. So salmon, we think, comes from the Latin word salmo, which means to leap. And so and I will show you pictures of this, but if you look at salmon that are swimming upstream, when they swim upstream, they often have to leap up through waterfalls, small waterfalls and rapids and things like that. And that is something I breezed over. When they're coming back to spawn, when they're spawning, they're going upriver. They're going against the current. They're not eating anything. They are relying on their own fat storage, and they're swimming against this current. And it's normally like a very, very fast river. So they're very, very strong. The largest salmon is a Chinook salmon, also known as a king salmon, Steakwe, if you speak Hokkaido, Tai. They get up to 58 inches, which is 1.5 meters long, and 126 pounds, or 57.2 kilograms. That is a fish. That is such a big fish. Pink salmon are the smallest. They are 30 inches or 0.8 meters long and about 12 pounds or 5.4 kilograms, which still, that's a fish. That is a very, very, very big fish. The largest or the longest, we'll say, migration is Chinook. Again, we do love our Chinook. They migrate upstream through the fall, and they can go sometimes 1,500 kilometers or 932 miles inland. So this is why they're so amazing, because they didn't eat anything at all, and they are swimming 900 miles or 1,500 kilometers upstream so they can lay their eggs. And this is how the nutrients from the sea get 1,500 kilometers inland somehow. Super, super neat. How long do salmon live? That's a great question. Most salmon live between 2 and 7 years. Steelhead trout, which remember are salmon, live about 11 years. But it is super interesting because like they do all of this work, and sometimes this is 2 years. They, from elven to smolt to just regular fish to spawning fish, go back 1,500 kilometers to their home rivers, and they're doing this in 2 years. It's a lot of work, my friends. It's so much work. So what do they eat is another excellent question. Salmon typically when they're in the rivers will eat insects, insects and algae and things like that. And when they get out to the ocean, they eat sea life like crabs and shrimp and things like that. So that is everything that I know about salmon and even more. I know this is sort of like a longer episode, and I say that all the time, but I think it's just so interesting to think about how far they travel, and then also like how their bodies know that they should change from freshwater to saltwater back to freshwater again. And if you talk to anyone that loves salmon, they will also sit down with you and go, whoa, this is a super neat thing about salmon. They are amazing. Okay, so let's look at salmon. So this is a sockeye salmon, and this is what I said you would look at and be like, what? So remember, when they are younger, they look like the pebbles from the freshwater rivers they live in. When they are older, they are bright silver, so they look like the ocean that they live in. And when they want to make babies and, eggs, this is what they look like. So this is a female and a male sockeye salmon. The male one looks like a wizard, and the female one has a good old I'm a fish face. And so you can tell the difference very easily with sockeye salmon. It is if it's a boy or a girl. And this is, we're not doing animal chat time with bears, but I did want to show off how important these animals are to everything in the ecosystem, but including bears that need a lot of calories before they go into hibernation. These are all sockeye salmon. So you can tell the difference of the colors at the very start of spawning, and then which is the one at the bottom, and then when they get to where they want to lay their eggs, and they're very, very, very red, which is amazing. You can tell the one at the top left is a lady because she has I'm a fish face, and then the one in the bear's mouth is a wizard, so it must be male. Here are more sockeye salmon. I know I talk a lot about Chinooks, but it's just really cool to see how beautiful they are and how these sockeye just look so different from other fishies. And you can see when they're spawning, they're all spawning together. There's a huge run of them, so thousands will come up these rivers together. This very, very fancy fellow is a Chinook salmon, sorry. And so you can see when they start their spawning and then when they're finished, how red they get and how they just really want to show off. I would like to lay eggs, please. Look how much I want to lay eggs. I'm blushing from snout to tail. Um, Here are some more. So again, you can just see how big these salmon are, and how they just really it is they protect themselves in just huge numbers. And I guess that's it. So these are also Chinook salmon, and you can just yeah, remember they can get really, really big, and they do protect themselves by having so many go up the streams at one time. So if bears or eagles or sometimes seals will wait in the estuaries, and some will get eaten, as is a circle of life, but so many more will get through, so they can lay their eggs. If you want to see some really amazing footage, you should look up the world's longest wooden fish ladder. It is in Whitehorse, Yukon, and it's amazing. There's like quite a big dam that they made in Whitehorse for power, but it is a huge salmon run. And so there is a ladder that the fish swim up. And basically, what it is there's a bunch of pools that go over the height of land. So instead of fish having to jump over a waterfall or a dam, a hydro dam, anything like that, they jump. They do like a little 30-centimeter jump, whoop, and they sit in that pool, and then they do another 30-centimeter jump, whoop, and it just takes them that long to get from the ocean to the fresh water. And so it's one of the ways that humans can be a little more thoughtful when they are making things on rivers that salmon live in. So check that out. It is amazing to see. It's amazing to see salmon swim all that way. Thank you very much, everyone. You had such good questions, and I really enjoyed my time talking about salmon. And thank you. We will see you next time.